There's something you've been carrying for years. Not a scar, but something heavier. It's invisible to the world, but not to you. You feel it when you're alone. You feel it when you look in the mirror, and something doesn't match. It's the subtle ache of living a life that doesn't feel like yours. And Carl Jung believed that until you let go of this one thing, you will never, not fully, become yourself. Stay with me, because this one thing has been shaping your thoughts, your identity, your future, and it's time to name it. Jung called it the persona, the mask we wear to survive the world. It's not evil, it's not fake, it's crafted, slowly, silently, by the part of you that just wanted to be safe, to be accepted, to belong, to avoid pain. You didn't choose to build it, you just learned. Learned what to say, what not to feel, how to shrink, how to sparkle. You learned it early. Maybe you learned to be funny, so no one would notice how heavy your sadness was. Maybe you learned to be responsible, because if you weren't perfect, someone might leave. Maybe you learned to be impressive, because you thought if you were enough, maybe love wouldn't hurt. And maybe you even forgot you were performing, because it became second nature, because it worked. That's the painful part. It worked. People liked you. You achieved things. You seemed fine. But inside, the real you began to fade. Layer by layer, the performance covered the soul. And one day you woke up with everything, except yourself. The privilege of a lifetime, Jung said, is to become who you truly are. But here's the part most people never talk about. That privilege requires a sacrifice. You have to shed the self that once saved you. You have to grieve the version of you that everyone loved, but that you no longer recognize. And that's terrifying. Because if you let go of the mask, what's left? Just you. Raw, honest, unfiltered, a little broken, a little beautiful, a little unknown, but real. And real is the only place you'll ever feel whole. So ask yourself this: who did you become to survive? Not who you are now, not who you're trying to be, but who you had to become when the world first showed you it wasn't safe to be fully seen. Was it the achiever, the quiet one, the peacemaker, the one who always made people laugh, even when you felt like crying? Because we all became something, not to deceive, but to protect. What parts of yourself did you silence, just to be accepted? Was it your anger, your sensitivity, your ambition, your voice? How many times did you mute your truth, just to avoid being too much? And maybe the most haunting question of all: when did you first realize you were performing? Was it in a relationship, at your job, in the mirror? That moment when something in you whispered, "This isn't me." That's not just discomfort, that's your soul trying to wake you up. And here's the tragedy: most people don't slow down long enough to ask these questions. They just keep playing the role, smiling, nodding, grinding, pleasing, even after the curtain has already fallen. They keep acting like it's still the first act, while their real self waits backstage, wondering if it will ever get to step into the light. The danger isn't in wearing a mask. It never was. Sometimes the mask saves you. It helps you belong. It helps you survive. The real danger is in forgetting there's a face underneath it. Because over time, the performance stops feeling like a performance. It becomes habit, then identity, then truth. And one day, you wake up and feel like a stranger in your own life. Your days look full, but you feel empty. Your success doesn't satisfy, not because it wasn't real, but because it wasn't yours. Your relationships feel scripted. You're saying all the right things, but something feels missing. like you're there, but not really present. Even your goals feel foreign, like a checklist handed to you by a world that never asked who you actually are. And yet, you keep going, you keep achieving, you keep playing the role, because deep down, you're scared. What happens if you stop? What's left if you take off the mask? Who are you without the status, without the praise, without the identity you've been building for years? Jung understood this fear, and he said it clearly. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. Because facing your soul doesn't feel noble, it doesn't feel romantic, it feels like loss. Not just sadness, but the grief of everything you pretended to be. The identity that got you applause, the mask that made you lovable, the role that kept you safe. And this is the part most people avoid. Letting go of the false self doesn't just feel like change, it feels like death. A death of who you thought you had to be. But that grief, that uncomfortable, unfamiliar emptiness, isn't failure. It's the first step toward becoming whole. Because wholeness doesn't begin with becoming more. It begins with releasing what you were never meant to hold. The danger isn't in wearing a mask. It never was. Sometimes the mask saves you. It helps you belong. It helps you survive. The real danger is in forgetting there's a face underneath it. Because over time, the performance stops feeling like a performance. It becomes habit, then identity, then truth. And one day, you wake up and feel like a stranger in your own life. Your days look full, but you feel empty. Your success doesn't satisfy, not because it wasn't real, but because it wasn't yours. Your relationships feel scripted. You're saying all the right things, but something feels missing. Like you're there, but not really present. Even your goals feel foreign, like a checklist handed to you by a world that never asked who you actually are. And yet, you keep going, you keep achieving, you keep playing the role, because deep down, you're scared. What happens if you stop? What's left if you take off the mask? Who are you without the status, without the praise, without the identity you've been building for years? Jung understood this fear, and he said it clearly. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. Because facing your soul doesn't feel noble, it doesn't feel romantic, it feels like loss. Not just sadness, but the grief of everything you pretended to be. The identity that got you applause, the mask that made you lovable, the role that kept you safe. And this is the part most people avoid. Letting go of the false self doesn't just feel like change, it feels like death. A death of who you thought you had to be. But that grief, that uncomfortable, unfamiliar emptiness, isn't failure. It's the first step toward becoming whole. Because wholeness doesn't begin with becoming more. It begins with releasing what you were never meant to hold. Carl Jung called the process of becoming your true self individuation. Not self-improvement, not personal development, not some morning routine optimized for productivity, but integration. The quiet, powerful reunion of every part of you you once disowned. And here's what he discovered. You don't become yourself by adding more. You don't become whole by stacking affirmations, tools, or strategies. You become yourself by letting go of the need to impress. Because you realize the real ones don't need to be dazzled. Letting go of the version of you that never says no. Because boundaries are not rejection, they are self-respect. Letting go of the pressure to always seem fine. Because pretending you're okay has become more exhausting than actually healing. Because beneath all of that noise, beneath the armor, beneath the applause, beneath the curated identity you've been managing like a brand, there's a self that's been waiting to be remembered. Not a perfect self, not the most disciplined, most productive, most impressive version of you, but a true one, the one that speaks in your quiet moments, the one that flinches when you betray your truth, the one that feels more like you than anything you've shown the world. Individuation isn't about changing, it's about returning to what is already whole and was never meant to be fractured in the first place. But here's the hard truth. You can't integrate what you keep rejecting. You can't heal the parts of you you still resent. You can't become whole while disowning your shadow. That's why individuation demands more than awareness. It demands acceptance. Not of your potential, but of your wounds, your contradictions, your forgotten dreams, your repressed voice. To become who you are, you must welcome every version of who you've been. And that doesn't happen in a rush. It happens in the pause, in the slowing down, in the stillness, in the moment you stop striving to become better and start asking, who am I beneath the striving? That's where individuation begins, not in a breakthrough, but in a soft surrender to your deepest truth. So pause for a moment, take a breath, and ask yourself, who are you beneath your habits? Not your schedule, not your morning routine, not the to-do list version of you, but the one who shows up when no one is watching, when there's nothing to prove, when you're too tired to pretend. Who is that person? What would your days look like if you didn't need to prove anything? If you weren't trying to be productive, impressive, admired, but simply true? Would you still chase the same goals? Would you still be in that relationship? Would you still live the same story? Or would you finally rewrite it? What truth have you been too afraid to say out loud? That you're lonely, that you're angry, that you've outgrown who you used to be. Or maybe that you don't even know who you are anymore. And that's okay. Because there's no rush here. There's no pressure to arrive. But you feel it, don't you? In the silence, in the stillness between the roles and routines, something is stirring. Something ancient, something real. The real you. Not trying to take over, not trying to be loud. Just waiting, quietly, patiently, for you to remember. The persona isn't the only mask, it's just the outer layer. The version of you the world applauds. The one that knows how to smile on cue, even when something inside is falling apart. But behind that, Jung discovered something deeper, darker, and yet far more honest. He called it the shadow. It's everything you've repressed, everything you've shoved into the basement of your being, every feeling that got punished, every truth that got labelled too much, too emotional, too angry, too selfish, too intense. So you buried it, you swallowed your fire, you softened your edges, you performed peace when all you wanted was to scream, and the world rewarded you for it, for being manageable, pleasant, predictable. But Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Because what you hide doesn't disappear, it leaks into your relationships, into your patterns, into the moments where you snap at something small because you're carrying something big you never named. And here's what no one tells you. You can't become whole by being nice. You become whole by being real. That means facing what you've been taught to avoid. The anger, the desire, the hunger for more, the resentment you weren't allowed to feel, the power you were told was dangerous, the grief that still lingers from a goodbye you never got to grieve. You don't have to act on these things. You don't have to unleash them, but you do have to see them. And more importantly, you have to honor them because they are part of you, and anything you disown will own you. Integration isn't about being light. It's not about being calm, clean, or healed. It's about being honest. Honest about the full spectrum of who you are. Honest about the parts you once locked away to be loved. Because real doesn't always look peaceful, but it feels like freedom. And freedom only begins when you stop running from yourself.
So what happens when you finally let go? When you stop clutching the persona like a shield and allow the shadow to step into the light? When you stop pretending, even if it costs you approval, even if it means walking away from the life you built in survival mode? What happens then? You stop chasing. You stop needing the next milestone to feel worthy. You stop bending yourself into versions the world applauds, but your soul resents. You stop apologizing for being too quiet, too intense, too slow, too much. You stop editing your soul just to keep the moment comfortable. And something strange and beautiful begins to unfold. You begin to trust yourself. Not the image, not the projection, but the one beneath it all. You say what you mean, even if your voice shakes. You feel what you feel, even if it makes others uncomfortable. You choose presence over performance, and you start walking through your life unmasked. Not because you're fearless, but because you finally realize the cost of pretending is far greater than the fear of being seen. You don't become someone new. You don't transform into a shiny, flawless version of yourself. You return to something ancient, something you've known all along. The self before the mask, the soul before the performance, the voice before it was silenced, the dream before it was shamed, the you before the world taught you to be someone else. And it doesn't feel loud. It doesn't feel grand. It feels quiet, centered, sacred, like coming home. So now, the choice is yours. You can keep holding on to the version of you that once kept you safe, the one who knew how to avoid conflict, who knew how to be liked, who worked hard, stayed quiet, said the right things. That version served you. It helped you survive what you weren't ready to face. It helped you belong in places you were never fully seen. It did its job. And maybe it deserves your gratitude, but not your loyalty, because you're not here to stay small. You're not here to stay hidden. You're not here to live behind a mask. You're here to become, to stretch, to remember, to rebuild your life not around protection, but around truth. And that journey, it doesn't begin when you're perfect. It begins when you're done pretending. The most terrifying thing, Jung said, is to accept oneself completely. Yes, it's terrifying, because once you accept yourself, the real you, there's no one left to blame, no one left to hide behind. But it's also the most liberating thing you will ever do, because once you accept yourself,
No one can take your power away again. You don't have to perform, you don't have to explain, you don't have to earn the right to be who you are. You just are. And that's the beginning of everything.